We obviously love professional wrestling, but sometimes pro wrestling is a really tough business to love. Sure, we get thrilling moments, show-stopping matches, and unforgettable personalities, but with that comes a pretty decent dose of horrible as well. The amount of scandals that have rocked the industry, from the Ring Boy scandal in the 80s, to the steroid trials in the 90s, to the Chris Benoit tragedy in the early 2000s, it sucks. They all suck. It's rough. And what's worse is that even with those high-profile events, there are still dozens of scandals that quickly went away. I'm Senior Siete for 7 Wrestling. Let's take a look at 7 disturbing WWE scandals you probably didn't know about. Now, before we get into this, we appreciate your support, so if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and Kona Crush that notification bell. Also, yeah, I'm sure some of you know about some or all of these scandals. Number 1. Dreamer's Nightmare. 2001 was a wild time, brother. The WWE was absolutely on fire, with a main event scene consisting of Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, Undertaker, Kane, Kurt Angle, Rikishi. The mid-card had some awesome up-and-comers like Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero. Tag teams had been enjoying a real resurgence with the Hardy Boys, Dudleys, and Edge and Christian. Meanwhile, the competition that seemed to be flourishing only a year or two before was absolutely on the ropes. ECW was seeing its dying days as they weren't able to secure a cable deal, and companies were refusing to pay them the pay-per-view revenue that they were owed. WCW was undergoing a change of guard as Eric Bischoff had rallied together a team of investors in the hopes of reviving the floundering brand. And then they were both gone. Quickly. ECW would go out not with a bang but with a whimper, with their last show being on January 13th, 2001, a house show in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, far away from their home base of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. WCW would be gone a few short months later when it was learned that a slot on TNT would not be included in any sale of the storied brand. Without it, Bischoff didn't see any way in which he could justify the purchase. When it was all said and done, Vince McMahon bought what was left of WCW, meaning their trademarks and video library, for around $4.2 million. Peanuts. Well, I mean, peanuts for Vince. That'd be huge for me. Feel free to buy a t-shirt on your way out. In a blink of an eye, all that was left was Vince and his then World Wrestling Federation, all building to what is arguably the best WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 17, or X7 if you don't know how Roman numerals work. The show was just firing on all cylinders. Almost every match was amazing, like a 5-star series finale of one of the most exciting times to be a wrestling fan. And it all ended with Steve Austin turning on The Rock and joining sides with Vince McMahon. But it almost ended very differently. You often hear Paul Heyman referred to as being a cult-like personality, and if you saw the way the talent at ECW followed him into battle, you'd believe it. Here, Heyman had created an island of misfit toys, arguably not big enough or talented enough or marketable enough to make it in the big leagues, but he was a master storyteller who had a gift for accentuating a talent's gifts and hiding their negatives. Best example of this is the wrestler 911, who was an absolute star in ECW. He'd come out, hit an impressive chokeslam, and then leave. He quickly fizzled out when he was exposed in WCW under the name Big Al. Big Al, everybody. Tommy Dreamer was another excellent example of this. When Dreamer came to ECW, he was, to put it lightly, a dork with suspenders. He and Heyman would work together to change his image into a tough-as-nails badass. Heyman would consider Dreamer the wrestling equivalent of Die Hard's John McClane, an ordinary man who could achieve amazing things when pushed to his limit. Dreamer would eventually be considered the heart and soul of the company. And while the WWE and WCW would poach ECW talent, Dreamer always stayed. On his House of Hardcore podcast, Dreamer would say, "When ECW went out of business, I was 29 years old. I had a lot of my money, my parents' money, trying to float the company. I thought me and Paul Heyman were super tight, but he screwed me over big time." Now, what Dreamer was referring to is the fact that Heyman had been accepting money from Vince McMahon to run ECW the whole time. And now that ECW was gone, Heyman was immediately slotted into a position as one of the lead announcers for Monday Night Raw. Dreamer would say, "I had turned down hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to WCW, and now I was unemployed. I went from a $750,000 offer and Paul crying to me that if I leave ECW, it'll go out of business. Meanwhile, he was getting a paycheck from WWE. I don't begrudge him, but then I did. Heyman would attempt to make it right with Dreamer, telling him he'd make his debut at WrestleMania 17, at first in the TLC match between the Hardys, Dudleys, and Edge and Christian, then in a bout for the Hardcore title. But all of those opportunities were canceled, and Dreamer was in a very dark place. He was in Houston for WrestleMania weekend and noticed that in Texas you're allowed to have firearms in the venues. This sparked a horrific idea. Dreamer would say, "I was across the street from the Astrodome, it resonated in my head so much. I'll tell you what I wanted to do. It's sick that I think this. At WrestleMania, I was going to hop the rail and whack Paulie in the back of the head right at the announce table. Then, I was going to whack myself, the ultimate martyr. I was going to hit my pose, crack, boom, pull the trigger." Fortunately, Jim Ross would reach out to Dreamer before that fateful day and leave a message telling Tommy that they were still very interested in bringing him in, and that was enough to get Dreamer to move on from his terrible plan. Number 2. Crew held hostage. The WWE's relationship with the Saudi government is a controversial one to say the least. When it first started in 2018, it happened on the heels of one of the weirdest WrestleMania main events of all time. In the build-up to WrestleMania 34, the WWE had made it a point that nobody could kick out of Brock Lesnar's F5. Just one was all it took for Brock to take down his opponents. Of course, this was the company's 30th attempt to get Roman Reigns over as a good guy. And it did not work. The match was flat, the crowd was dead, F5 after F5 with Reigns kicking out, and when Lesnar finally did pick up the win, we were all left shocked, but, like not in a good way. At the time, the popular theory was that they were holding off on the title change until the Greatest Royal Rumble pay-per-view a few weeks later that would be held in Saudi Arabia. This was very surprising because you don't just use WrestleMania to build to another show. Those accusations would be unfounded because Lesnar would go on to retain the belt at that show as well, but it did set the narrative that these shows were a big deal. We'd see part-timers like Triple H, John Cena, Goldberg, and The Undertaker. There'd be all kinds of weird awards like the green belt that Braun Strowman won for winning the 50-man Royal Rumble, Undertaker winning this weird mountain trophy, and just a couple months ago, we had them win the Crown Jewel Championship. And when we learned what the WWE was making for these events, it all made sense. It was revealed that the WWE had signed a 10-year contract with the Saudi Arabia Sports Authority for a whopping $1 billion. That is billion with a B. So they're getting $50 million a show. No wonder they can afford all the big-name talent. But this has not been a slam dunk for the WWE. Critics point to Saudi Arabia's documented human rights abuses, including restrictions on freedom of speech, gender inequality, and severe punishments for dissent. The Saudi government has been accused of using major international partnerships like WWE to improve its global image and distract from its human rights record. This practice, which is known as sports washing, is seen as a way for the regime to gain legitimacy without actually addressing their internal issues. Also, while female wrestlers have performed in Saudi Arabia in recent years, their costumes and performances must adhere to very strict guidelines, sparking debates about compromises to WWE's progressive branding. And this doesn't even include the time the WWE talent was seemingly held hostage. In November 2019, several WWE wrestlers and staff found themselves unexpectedly stranded in Saudi Arabia following the Crown Jewel event in Riyadh. This delay came after WWE and its Saudi partners had recently resolved tensions over unpaid rights fees, with Saudi Arabia broadcasting the event on state television only after the payment dispute was settled. While initial reports attributed the delay to mechanical issues with the plane, speculation and conflicting narratives suggested deeper reasons, including strained relations between the WWE and Saudi Arabia. This incident fueled widespread rumors, with some alleging political tensions between Vince McMahon and Saudi authorities. WWE officially cited technical difficulties as the cause, but the wrestlers expressed frustration, taking to social media to hint at unease with the situation. The term hostage was actually used several times. A select group, including major stars like Brock Lesnar and Hulk Hogan, managed to leave via private jets, while most others were left waiting for extended periods of time before their return to the US. Now, while a formal explanation as to what happened has never been expressed, it's believed by most that Saudi Arabia and Vince McMahon were participating in some kind of metaphorical strudel measuring contest, with the WWE roster getting stuck in the middle. All of this while Vince's private jet ferried him back to the United States. Number 3. 24-inch politicking. The Rock and wrestling era was the product of the perfect idea man partnering with the perfect talent and them driving it until the wheels came off. The formula was great. McMahon promoted the Hulkster, who already had a degree of fame due to his appearance in the blockbuster movie Rocky III, as the all-American good guy. A new monster threat would enter the company. They'd work their way up through the middle card and upper card good guys. They'd square off against Hulk Hogan, big boot, leg drop, 1, 2, 3, lather, rinse, repeat. Could someone else have done Hogan's job? Maybe. There were always whispers that McMahon originally wanted Dusty Rhodes or a couple other guys to be in that role. And because it's wrestling, there were always rumors that Hogan was using his sway to turn things in his favor, pulling attention from the Ultimate Warrior's win at WrestleMania 6. You've got the time he politicked his way into a 5th world title run at WrestleMania 9. Whatever went down at Starrcade 97 that caused the referee's fast counting at Sting to become a very regular count. And even weird petty things like refusing to legally be eliminated from a battle royal that he wasn't scheduled to win. Every top guy is going to be accused of using politics to improve their career, but to his credit, maybe, I guess, Hogan actually owned up to it. Back in 2018, during an interview with the Orlando Sentinel, Hogan would say, "Once I got in the spot, to keep the spot, that's where the politics came in. Everybody goes, well, Hulk Hogan was a politician. Well, thank God I was. That's why I made more money than anybody. That's why I kept the belt longer. That's why instead of a 5 or 6 or 10-year run like The Rock or Stone Cold or different wrestlers, I had a 35-year run on top." Okay, so he was in it for himself, and I guess he could make the argument that Hulk Hogan being on top sold a lot of tickets and a lot of merchandise, and that helped all the wrestlers below him, all the wrestlers that were working hard to keep him looking good. But the truth is, when Hogan had the chance to help the WWE roster as a whole, or line his pockets, the Hulkster chose himself. Jesse the Body Ventura has long been an outspoken advocate for wrestlers' rights. Concerned about the lack of health care and retirement benefits, Ventura saw WrestleMania 2 as an opportunity to rally support within the locker room to form a pro wrestling talent union. In a recent interview with Vanguard, Ventura said, "Boys, now's the time to unionize. All the publicity's gone out. All we have to do is stick together, go out to the press and say, we refuse to wrestle unless federal negotiators are brought in. It's a federal law," I said. "Who do you think turns on the lights in these buildings? Union people. If they recognize what we're doing, Vince cannot run WrestleMania." The next day, Ventura would get a call from Vince McMahon telling Jesse to shut all of this union talk down. Ventura would leave the WWE to perform in the movie Predator, where he'd receive his health care and retirement benefits through the Screen Actors Guild. And when Ventura learned who had told Vince about his plan to start a union, he wasn't shocked to learn that it was none other than Hulk Hogan himself. Fight for the rights of every man indeed. Number 4. The Real Warrior. I don't know if there's a more perfect example of corporate whitewashing than the WWE Hall of Fame's Warrior Award. According to WWE.com, the Warrior Award is presented to an individual who has exhibited unwavering strength and perseverance and who lives life with the courage and compassion that embodies the indomitable spirit of the Ultimate Warrior. Sounds nice. But that is a very interesting take from a company that once produced a DVD tearing that indomitable spirit to shreds. In 2005, the WWE released The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, a DVD that combined match highlights, interviews, and behind-the-scenes footage to paint a very unflattering picture of the Ultimate Warrior's career. WWE executives, wrestlers, and other personalities, including Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan, and others, weighed in on the Warrior's impact on the industry. While some praise his charisma, intensity, and unique persona, much of the narrative is very critical, focusing on his perceived lack of in-ring skill, backstage behavior, and tumultuous relationship with WWE management. There was even a segment highlighting Warrior's post-ring activities, such as his infamous 2005 speech at the University of Connecticut, where he was accused of making racist and homophobic remarks. All of this was swept under the rug when the Warrior made his return to the WWE to be inducted into the 2014 class of the WWE Hall of Fame. The Warrior would shockingly pass away a few days after his induction, and the WWE would honor him by creating the award he had pitched during the Hall of Fame speech. However, instead of this award being presented to a backstage worker who deserves recognition, it became a catch-all for people around the wrestling industry who had shown bravery or performed charitable acts. And for a lot of people, watching a good-natured humanitarian award being named after someone who clearly had some less than humanitarian thoughts, it's rough. For example, when discussing the victims of 2005's Hurricane Katrina, the one that decimated the New Orleans area, the Warrior said, "If we could be shown what general conditions they lived in before the hurricane, we could see that they had little respect for what they did have. We could see just how unorganized, unclean, and dysfunctionally they lived. They never gave a care for order, cleanliness, or function before, but now that they can get someone's attention who will possibly take over the responsibility of their life for them, they go on these tirades about how their life has been ruined. Their lives were already in ruin. Self-ruin." Ugh. And when discussing Bobby the Brain Heenan's cancer diagnosis, the Warrior would say, "It's just too difficult to keep a straight face talking about the pure two-faced bag that you are, and always have been. What, with you also actually wearing one as a piece of body jewelry? You are dying, diseased on the inside, and no more time is left to get back any of the integrity that matters the most on death's bed." And yeah, maybe it's not cool to talk negatively about someone who is deceased, but that never stopped the Warrior. After Heath Ledger's passing, the Warrior would say, "By today's standard, though, I do have to agree that he was a great father, perhaps even greater than the father of the year Hulk Hogan. After all, Leather Hedger did what it took to kill himself. His kid is without a father, yes, but the negative influence is now removed, and his own child has the chance for a full recovery." Yeah, indomitable spirit. Number 5, blissfully unaware. I'm pretty sure we've touched on this before, but it probably bears repeating. If you think you are contacting a WWE superstar through their secret private social media account, you probably aren't. Especially if they out of the blue ask for money for a sick relative or they request video game gift cards. Trust me, it's a scam. I know because my girlfriend Tiffany Stratton told me that on Instagram. And one poor fella who fell for this popular scam did it to the tune of $1 million. According to a recent report from the New York Times, 79-year-old Alfred Mancinelli, a devoted WWE fan, was deceived by a fake Alexa Bliss into believing they were in a romantic relationship. Over time, Mancinelli was conned out of $1 million, which tragically included his granddaughter's college fund. Despite his family's efforts to intervene, the scammer's grip was unrelenting. Mancinelli's son Chris shared with the Times, "There was nothing we could do to convince him. In fact, when Chris tried to move his father's remaining $100,000 to a safer account, Alfred sued his own son, a testament to how deeply the deception ran." Alfred Mancinelli, like many others, was vulnerable after facing personal tragedy. His isolation and early retirement made him an easy target for scammers who preyed on his trust. The fake Bliss even fabricated outrageous stories alleging mistreatment by former WWE CEO Vince McMahon and requesting money for medical expenses. Although, unfortunately, being mistreated at the hands of Vince McMahon is actually a very believable scenario. And in this case, this is just one example of a growing epidemic. Earlier this year, WWE's Adam Pearce issued a stark warning on social media about such scams, saying, "If you have given money online to the likes of Jey Uso, Seth Rollins, etc., I feel for you. I'm sorry that you got duped, but I can't help. Whatever job duties you believe I have, police work isn't one of them. Don't give strangers money online." In fact, it was a scam like this that led to Seth Rollins being attacked by a fan back in 2021. On the Impulsive podcast, Rollins would say, "He was catfished online by someone pretending to be me. There was some amount of money exchanged for whatever he was being asked for, and this is not a new phenomena. People will do this it happens a lot with our girls. People will catfish as our female superstars, and they'll just prey on these people. They'll say, 'Oh, my brother's sick in the hospital, can you send money?' So when online, good rule of thumb is that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is." Number 6, Hogan's other tape. Oh, hey! Hulk's just on this list twice. Now, I assume most people watching a video like this are familiar with the Hulk Hogan versus Gawker case, but you know what happens when you assume. The case centered around a leaked Amore tape featuring Hogan and his best friend's wife. Gawker, a media outlet known for its edgy and invasive reporting, published a snippet of the tape along with an article claiming it was a matter of public interest. But what hurt Hogan way more than the consensual intercourse with a friend's wife that the friend was completely aware of, hey, you do you, sorry, what hurt him more than that was Hogan's harsh racist diatribe that accompanied the other activities. WWE was quick to act, firing Hogan from his Legends contract and removing him from the WWE Hall of Fame. He would return to the company 3 years later, and now they act like nothing has happened. However, this wasn't the only instance of the Hulkster being caught saying racially insensitive things. In a jailhouse phone call between Hogan and his son Nick in 2007, Hogan would say, "You know that God gave you this vibe and this energy that you and I are going to live forever, bro. I just hope we don't come back as a couple, I don't want to say it, Blizzak Gazais. You know what I'm saying?" And if you don't speak Carney, he was saying black guys. So, while his son was in prison for having an accident while drag racing while intoxicated, an accident that left a friend of his with severe brain injury, Hogan's biggest concern was that they not be reincarnated as black guys. Yikes. Number 7. Battle Royal Battle. WrestleMania is the endgame for the wrestling calendar, a time for big feuds to finally be settled, for the next top guy to be crowned, and for fancy ring entrances that are both awesome and awkward. And it must break a performer's heart to get left off of the showcase of the Immortals. So there's usually a multi-man match to get more and more people on the card. In recent years, this has been the purpose of the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, although now that's been relegated to SmackDown. When a decision had been made to give the female roster a similar outlet for appearing on the show in 2018, the call was made to name a women's battle royal after legendary female wrestler, the fabulous Moolah. And this did not go over well. Born Mary Ellison in 1923, the fabulous Moolah was a towering figure in the history of women's wrestling. Her career was a mix of groundbreaking success and enduring controversy. As a wrestler, promoter, and trainer, Moolah controlled the women's wrestling scene for over 30 years. Her legacy, however, is clouded by accusations of financial exploitation, forced labor, and other unethical practices. Former trainees revealed she charged exorbitant rents, took steep cuts of earnings, and maintained an almost monopolistic grip on the female side of the industry. Allegations of even darker behaviors such as sexual exploitation and theft further tainted her image. The backlash from wrestling fans was quick and loud, which that's something Vince McMahon has a history of ignoring. But then, WrestleMania sponsor Snickers made this announcement. "We were recently made aware of the World Wrestling Entertainment Incorporated's decision to honor a former wrestler during the upcoming WrestleMania 34 event. As a principle-based business that has long championed creating inclusive environments that encourage and empower everyone to reach their full potential, this is unacceptable. We are engaging with the WWE to express our disappointment." It did not take long after that for the event to be renamed the WrestleMania Women's Battle Royal, which goes to show you that Vince can take on the federal government, but he is not going to mess with Snickers. Well, there's our list. Did we forget any other WWE controversies that you probably forgot about? If so, please leave them in the comments section below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and DDT that notification bell. Until next time, I'm Senior Siete for 7 Wrestling saying bye-bye.